Welcome back to Fresh Corduroy. Today's episode is one I've been looking forward to for a while. Because if you've ever wondered why a ski feels the way it does, or how equipment actually makes its way from an idea to a World Cup start gate or your local ski shop, this conversation is for you. My guest is Thor Verdonk, Global Technical Director for the Rossignol Group. Thor has spent more than 3 decades deep inside ski and boot development, working across Rossignol, Dynastar, and Lang, bridging the gap between athletes, engineers, and the skiers who ultimately end up on the product. We talk about everything from World Cup prototyping and athlete feedback to why boots haven't changed much on the outside but have evolved dramatically on the inside, to how trends like rocker, carbon, weight, and sustainability actually play out in the real world. What I loved about this conversation is that Thor pulls back the curtain. He explains how decisions are made, where performance really comes from, and why the best skis are always the sum of many small, deliberate choices. Now, let's get some fresh corduroy with Thor Verdonk. Thor, welcome to Fresh Corduroy.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks for having me. Always happy to talk anything skiing.
Yes, likewise. Before we talk ski boots, skis, bindings, etc., let's get right to the heart of the matter. What's Thor's skiing origin story? Where and when did you get started skiing?
Well, I got started pretty young. I'm actually first generation American. I'm descendant of flatlanders from the Netherlands. And when my father moved here, he actually moved to Indianapolis and saw ski magazines with pictures of Vermont. So he took a job in Vermont just so he could ski, and that's how I got started in the early 70s, I guess. So cried for the first several times, and then all of a sudden wanted to go again and again. But I would say my real passion and when it really turned on for me is when my parents enrolled me in the race program at Smuggler's Notch in Vermont, and that's where I'm from, and that's what I would call my home hill.
That's terrific. It is a great hill, great community up there as well. So
That it is. A little cold
yeah,
at times, but
it can be, but that's New England for you, right? Just wait 5 minutes.
part of the sport, right?
Yeah, exactly. So how did you make your way from, growing up ski racing at Smuggler's Notch to Rossignol?
Well, that's kind of an interesting story. I've always been a tinkerer, building stuff, whether I machine my own stuff or 3D print. I do a lot of my own design, and I've done that since I was a kid. So I've always been kind of a hands-on person, even doing that when I was, a weekend skier at Smugglers. And through college, high school and college, I was a bike mechanic in town, and I actually got to know the guy who was in charge of Rossignol Race at the time, Randy Graves. And I was coaching in the winter months for Smugglers, and kind of struck up a conversation with Randy, and I was his bike mechanic, and he moved up in the company to be the product manager, and they needed someone for race, and I was lucky enough to have made that connection with Randy. So he's the one that really gave me the opportunity to get started in junior race.
That's great. Um, we could talk about junior race for a long time, but let's talk about. So today you are the global technical director for Rossignol Group, which encompasses. Why don't you talk about the different brands that it encompasses, and then how would you describe your day to day role across the different products, skis, boots, and bindings?
Yeah, I mean, the current role today, I've done a lot of roles within the company. I've been here 31 years now. And I mean, currently, the technical director position, it's a global position. I technically work in France, and I commute from Salt Lake to Europe, to Montebelluna for boots, and France for Italy for skis. essentially what my role today is I kind of am the conduit between, let's say, the marketing department and the engineers. So from the brief from the marketing to through to the engineers on kind of what we need for skiability, what it should feel and look like in terms of shape, or what kind of features we want the skier boot to have. So that's my role, so to speak. We do a lot of on snow testing. um, Day to day, it's hard to explain because I'm working on different projects at different times. So every day is different in that sense, but it's a combination of being on snow, testing, looking for nuances, how we can improve. And then, other days you're working on kind of revamping the design or dimensions and so on, and then working with the marketing team or telling the story also at the end once the product is finished.
So when Rossignol Group, sets out to create a new ski or boot, where does it start? Is it the athlete needs, and by athlete we could, that could be World Cup. It could also be the general recreational skier, consumer feedback, or new materials. Where do you begin the process?
Well, we always, again, it's a little different depending. If you're talking about racing, it really starts with the athletes. If you're talking about the top of the range in, let's say, a free ride category, it starts with the athletes. If we're talking about a commercial ski, then it's all the feedback that we've gotten from the past model, from the marketing team, what we might be missing or not missing in the range, or whether that's an actual model that we're missing in a waist width, for example, or if we're missing a skiability of some sort. So each is a little different in that sense. On the World Cup side, I mean, it's really the athletes and their feedback. They'll tell you we want more turn entry, so we'll start to work on that, whether that's by the side cut or by the construction, and then we'll start to test that. And as it starts to evolve and get acceptance, then we can start to build that into the rest of the range for the Europa Cup teams, and then for the junior program. um, Free ride, again, we use our World Free Ride Tour athletes. They give us feedback. So the top of the range, I would say, in both of those that have competitions connected to them, the athletes are a huge part of the development, of course, of anything new.
So let's touch on the competitive side of things, and given racing background, where did you? The last time we spoke, you mentioned that you may often test out multiple pairs, and frankly, a World Cup athlete may have multiple models, if you will, within say a slalom ski or a GS ski, and you'll begin to collect data on which ones are performing better than others. How does that work across both genders and perhaps different snow conditions, right? So hard, icy, an athlete may choose one type of ski over another based on that snow condition. And so, how do you take all of those different variables into account as you settle on the one that ultimately, makes its way into the call it the consume, the junior racing models?
Yeah. Um, well, obviously, in racing, it's relatively easy because the clock doesn't lie, right?
Yeah.
And so when you have the clock, it really helps in development because, when you talk a commercial ski, it's more about feeling and touch. In racing, the clock is the drop dead decider, I suppose. I would say it's very much like Formula One is kind of how we approach our World Cup racing and our entire race program. We have a concept we call World Cup Plus One. So at the World Cup level, when we start working on new skis, and let's say a slalom ski, we may make three or four versions of that ski, and that'll usually go to the, let's say, top 10 in the world in that discipline. And they will do the testing and the training, and by feeling what they feel, and the clock. one or two of them will kind of rise to the top. And once that rises to the top, we start to say, okay, let's take those two and bring it to the next level, to the, say, the top 30. And then if one or two of those traditionally trickles out as being the one that everyone will take, um, and from there is how we develop all the skis below that. So they really come from this World Cup plus one concept, where World Cup is your Formula One prototyping, testing, and as we kind of go through that thread and find the ski that seems to be working the best, that's what gets developed for the rest of the junior program, or what we call junior program, so junior fist level racing.
Right. Um, does ski flex or other attributes of the ski matter based on snow condition? And at the World Cup level, they may choose one model over another based on the the day's event.
I would say at the World Cup level, there's a little bit of that. It really kind of depends on the athlete. Some athletes are a little have a little finer touch with that, and others do not. They're both fast.
Yeah.
Either way, I think some of that setup, there's not a ton, because once you get kind of the timing down, jumping around from product to product constantly puts so many variables in that you don't see a lot of that. They traditionally tend to go one route. In downhill and super G, you might have some skis with different grinds because they react better in different snow conditions. And you might have one or two models for, let's say, a turnier course or a more gliding course. In slalom and GS, the binding setup and the plate setup can vary a little bit in terms of like snow condition. Um, I wouldn't say there's a slalom skier, for example, doesn't have four or five models for different snow conditions. They kind of narrow in pretty quickly on the ski that they'll use, and that may change during the year. As we continue to develop, right? We may have a ski which is working really well on hard snow, but when it's a little softer conditions, isn't quite where they want it to be. So we'll try to work again on the prototyping and go through that testing phase, and the ski really only moves up with that athlete when it starts to test in the condition that they want it to, and,
Got it.
and versus the timing, of course.
And what about boots and bindings for that matter? At least from my perception, the layperson's perception, the iteration on boots and bindings is slower. There's the boot design, with some exceptions, hasn't changed all that much in a long time. It's a four buckle overlap shell with an upper and lower cuff. Sure, there are rear entries and there's air bladders and boa and there's a variety of other things but it seems to me that boot design has remained relatively static. Like, what is the iteration on? And obviously disagree with me if I'm totally off base.
I mean, I don't think you're totally off base. It's interesting. Boots doesn't move as fast as skis does in terms of changing, let's say, at the racing level. There's kind of a interesting saying out there. You date your skis, but you marry your boots, right?
Yeah.
And so boot setup, athletes tend to change boots a little less often, but we are constantly working on new setups, and they may be simply boot board or stance oriented type of things. If you look at the boot, I mean, the boot I have back here on the back wall, the RS, is not drastically different from the boot that Bob Lang, who developed the first plastic boot. It's a pivot style boot, but advances in plastic have been drastic. We launched a technology called dual core, which is boots are really, the plastic brings energy. It kind of is the heart of the boot, and polyethers and polyurethanes absorb energy and release energy. And that most people tend to think about boots is sending information or power and transmission to the ski and binding system. A lot of people don't think about how important the plastic portion of the boot is to send information back. You have all your receptors in your foot, right? Your proprioception comes from your foot, and this tells you where you are in space at all time. And so getting information back is, am I on edge cleanly, or am I sliding? This is all coming from the boot up. So, working on plastic, and that, can be subtle adjustments in wall thickness, or dual core, where we inject two durometers of plastic at the same time, which takes already inherently energetic plastic and creates kind of a sandwich construction, which gives you a mechanical movement and energy. So I would say, on the outside, yes, the boots look not drastically different, but there are a lot of really subtle things inside of the boot, and in the construction of the boots that we work on.
Interesting. And as you described that, I thought to myself, while the materials may change significantly, or what you're working on, particularly for the racers, for the consumer market, it seems to me that there is more innovation, and maybe it's coming from marketing as opposed to athlete or consumer feedback. But you're striving for better fit, more comfortable, ease of use, i.e., easier to get in and out of, and so things like BOA or rear entry are more accommodated, because it's less about performance, right? Performance is only one facet of the equation as you're building out a boot. Am I getting that right? And there's a little bit more innovation of sorts in the recreational market.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I'm a big believer in, things are the sum of the parts, right? So it's performance and comfort have to come together in a marriage, right? And I equate that to, you can have the most comfortable boot, fits like a marshmallow. You're not going to have a good day because you can't control anything. Or you can have the full on race tight fit and have all the performance, but you're lacking the comfort. You're not having a good day either. So it's about really finding kind of that marriage of performance and comfort. And I would say, let's say, when we say recreational boots, I would call them more commercial boots, because we build high end boots for really strong skiers that kind of start to marry a little bit more of that comfort and performance together. But there is, I would say, the number one pain point for, let's say, the general skiing population is putting boots on and off. I mean, you do a Google search anytime, and the one that will pop up the most is, how do I put my ski boots on? And you'll get tips and tricks on how to put your boots on like a pro, how to put them on easier. So this is a pain point, obviously. So it's something that we need to address, obviously, in commercial boots, but still at the higher end ranges, at our performance level ranges. We're, a lot of what comes from race comes down, that dual core technology we brought down from race into there. What we're really focused on, let's say on the Lang side, with the new Shadow boot, if you've seen that, is to really basically enhance a skier's leverage. So to allow you to get more energy to the tip, get a stronger initiation. And, we've done that with looking at things a little different than the traditional boots. So that uses a blade system rather than the traditional two screws in the back. And what it does is it brings your leverage point higher up, and it allows you to drive more energy, use more of the front part of the boot to steer and to drive transmission.
Interesting. And coming back to skis, what is the life cycle, or time from iteration to store shelves? Like, how long does that take? Whether it be a race ski or a recreational ski.
Well, it can be done quickly. Like in the race world, it's done relatively quickly at the World Cup prototyping level. When you talk about more commercial skis, It's a year to a year and a half from initial discussion and brief. So just kind of writing down some points that you want the ski to do or to achieve to when it's finally in production. I would say it's a year to a year and a half. Um, you have a lot of testing, a lot of different iterations happen through that process. It's interesting developing skis. Sometimes on the second prototype you're like, bang, we nailed it, and it's like we can go to production. And other times you're working on 35 prototypes before you get there. So every ski's got its own little nuance and a little difference to it, but I'd say it's around a year typically.
And putting aside the athlete-driven development, obviously you're going to have World Cup athletes testing, World Cup race skis. For the recreational model line, who are the testers? What are you're not picking people off the lift and saying, "Hey, why don't you put some skis on and tell me what you think?" Who are they, and what is their job like?
Well, we have a core team. Myself, I'm on that team, and we have two other guys in France that are, let's say, full time, what we would call on snow test team. And then within that, we have kind of some circle and rings going out from that, where we have some professional skiers, whether they're ski patrollers, ex racers, or ski instructors. A lot of ski instructors that are part of that team as well. The key to testing for product development is when you're testing product development, it's very easy to say ski one brand against another and say, oh, those are drastically different. But if you take one model of ski and then you have five very subtle iterations of that ski, it takes a little bit of touch and learning to understand the small subtleties that you're looking for. So we have that core team that's full time doing that, and then we have those circles outside of that.
And they use an app, a questionnaire. I mean, what is the feedback that they're providing that helps you adjust the skis, features and parameters?
We have an app, of course. In today's world, everything
Yeah.
is an app. Used to be a little cardboard card, but we've moved to the app era. We do have about, I'd say, 8 points on that list, where we have a number system, 1 to 5. Whether that's turn initiation, grip, exit of the turn, pop and energy, stability, those type of things that we do put some numbers on. And then we have a free form that's typically their positives and negatives. And to be honest, this is where the real development comes from, is the free form. It's the feelings and the emotions that we get when we're on the skis. And you can start to see, sometimes in the team we might be totally opposed in terms of what our feelings and emotions are on a ski, and other times we'll all be aligned. And so when you start to get that alignment in that free form information, that's ultimately where we probably make the most amount of change and advancement in the development.
If I were to take a real world example, right? So the experience line is, I think you correct me if I'm wrong. It's the more mass front side offering of Rossignol comes in different waist widths. It's been around their experience, which has now been superseded, I think, by the arcade line. It's aimed at a broad swath of the recreational or consumer space. Is that a fair characterization?
Oh yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it's our all mountain ski, and I would call it all mountain to me is that it can ski anywhere.
Yeah.
We do have different waist widths offers in there. If you go with the 94, that's a little more powerful, strong, higher speed. 84 is designed to be a little quicker and snappier. But I think you're on point.
So I happen to have two pair. I don't have the arcades yet. Hope perhaps I will add that to my quiver shortly. But I have two older pairs of Experience 88s. The green and black version with the honeycomb tip, and then I think it was the next iteration, which is sort of blue and black and who knows what. No displayed honeycomb. The
Those were good ones.
the newer ones had much more rocker, tip rocker than say the green and black ones, which was much more of just a full camber ski. How does you, and then arcades are back to much more of a full can, again, correct me, I'm sure there's some subtle rocker, but much more rocker than those prior Experience 88s. How do you decide to go from a full camber ski to some with tip rocker to back to the full camber ski? Like, how does that product evolution happen over time?
Craig, it's a good analysis that you made. And um, part of that is a little bit market trends, right? Market trends tend to flow one way or another way. And it's always a pendulum, to be honest. I mean, if you look at sidecut, for example, when sidecut came into the market, it was like more sidecut, the better, right? Oh, that one has 13 meters. Well, this one has 11. It must be better than the 13, right? And so everything swung to this really tight radius, and then the pendulum kind of swings back out. Same thing happened with rocker. When rocker first came in free ride skis, the more rocker, they kind of look like Jester's clown shoes at one point, and then the rocker started to come down. When you talk about the experience skis that you had, again, they were really to be high performance on piste all mountain skis, which was the trend at the time, and they were essentially somewhat race constructions and wider waist widths. The market kind of trended towards, let's say, a little easier, a little more accessible. So more rocker came in kind of into the trend. And I think that trend is kind of blending back. More consumers that are really avid skiers have more of a quiver of skis than they ever did before. So it allowed us to really take arcade and bring it back to being a kind of a dedicated all mountain, groomer ski that has some off-piste capability. But, if you had a good powder day, you probably have a pair of powder skis.
And that would be my assessment as well, which is for the East Coast where I'm based, I would prefer to be on those older green and black ones that had much more camber. If I were to travel out west, I'd probably take the newer experience that had a bit more tip rocker, because I'd probably be in the trees and hoping for powder days, et cetera. So that makes total sense. And
Yeah, I mean,
you're right.
again, it's not, it's not, and I come back to this, and it's one of my biggest points with skis is that skis are always the sum of the parts, right? And so if you look at one particular parameter like rocker, you're not really getting the whole picture, because if I build a ski stiffer underfoot with more rocker, I can have potentially the same ski ability as a ski with less rocker, but with a softer flex. So it's really about balancing that recipe and getting kind of the rocker and the profile of the ski right, so that when you bend the ski, you have what I call balance, is where when you push on the ski really bends around you and comes back and doesn't force you into strange body positions. So I always like to come back to this sum of the parts, because you can make a ski drastically, you can take the same side cut and make it ski drastically different by the profile of the ski, or by adding or taking away rocker, for example.
And going back to the testing, you have this, yourself and the two core people in France, and others, who are professional skiers of one sort or another. I guess the question would be, how do you translate that to a recreational skier? So the more narrow waisted arcades, for instance, I don't know what the model range is exactly, but something in the 70s, would be aimed at a rising beginner slash intermediate type skier, and they aren't as proficient in various things that the professional skier that you're talking about and testing with. How do you translate that? Say, hey, this is what the beginner slash intermediate needs, which may be dictated by price point rather than performance. But how do you say this type of flex, or this rocker or camber, or this waist width, et cetera, will serve that type of skier the best? You follow the
Yeah,
question?
I do follow the question, and I mean, again, that's part of being a tester, right? We have to, when we test, we have to take a mindset of who the skier is for, and that's where the brief is so important of understanding who the target consumer is for a particular ski that we're developing. Um, but in a brief for a ski that you just explained, accessibility, the ability to go from carve to skid to control speed is typically how, let's say, a beginner or advancing skier would ski. So in our testing, we can adapt to that. Obviously, we don't ski every run with the same turn radius, with the same speed, and so on and so forth. So it takes a little experience to get used to that. And over time, when you develop new, you're always looking forward, but you're also looking backwards, right? At what ski you had there in the past, what were its strengths, what were its shortcomings, for the particular consumer target, and then how can we adapt that? So we have those in mind as we're developing the new ski to make those adjustments.
Got it. And what role does the different materials play in both the construction of the ski and pricing? I mean, we hear about carbon and was it titanium, flax, basalt, different poplar for different cores. How do integrating those different materials into the ski construction impact both cost as well as accessibility, as you describe it, depending on the particular target consumer?
Well, of course, adding materials adds cost. Again, this is why you have price points. But the materials make a huge difference in that sense. I mean, you mentioned basalt. That's one that's a big favorite for us. Actually, is basalt. When we first, so sometimes when we test new materials, we will take a current ski that we have and basically out of the wrapper, and we'll take our new development, and the only thing we change in that is a material. When we added basalt to the first experience range, when we started to use basalt, um, in two turns you were like, oh my god. And we, as a test team, we were joking, it's like, this is magic fiber. Because the only thing different in the ski was the actual basalt fiber instead of a fiberglass layer fiber. So that basalt gave you dampness and snow contact. So that may make some sense. But of course, materials like basalt or carbon or Kevlar, they have a cost to them. So you're not able to put them everywhere. So you can try to adjust the other snow contact. You can do it with the wood core and how you profile the wood core, and what I mean by profile, it's how it goes from under the foot, from the thickness to the thinness, all the way out to the tip. That profile is a huge, huge tuning point for us, to be able to adjust kind of skiability or accessibility or dampness. The metal layers, as you mentioned, provide a lot of stability and a lot of power and a lot of edge grip. Traditionally, you find it in the higher end skis because they are heavier skis, where let's say, aspiring skier is still wanting a little lighter, a little quicker, a little more accessible ski. So traditionally, you don't see aluminum in those skis.
And where have you seen the biggest gains in construction over the last decade? I mean, um, what kind of materials, or is there a process that's been innovative?
Well, I would say there's a couple things. I think the entire industry has gotten better at what I call balance, that ability of pushing the ski in the middle, having it bend around you. And I think people, most brands have been focusing on that a little bit. When I get to materials, I mean, on the Dynastar side, we worked, it started already quite a while ago. We started working on 3-layered sidewalls, and this just allowed the ski to have more bend to it and shearing effect. So essentially, if you think about a ski, what gives it energy and pop is that you have all these layers that are glued together and then really kind of smashed and pressed together. But when you're skiing, those layers want to move on each other, right? They want to bend. A visual example for me is if you take a magazine and you try to flex it in the middle, you see all the pages fold over. And this is exactly what a ski is doing. So getting those materials to move. And so on the Dynastar side, we really started to think about the core. So traditionally, a core is all just kind of vertical laminates of layers. And on Dynastar with Hybrid Core 2.0, we started to put wood in 3 layers. So we have wood transversal, and we have versal and transversal, and putting all that together encased in a PU outer shell. So we are able to get unbelievable snow contact. I mean, that's an example of an innovation that, focuses on how materials work together.
You've used the term snow contact a few times. How do you define that? Make sure that both myself and the listener understands what you mean by that.
That's fair. Snow contact it's really about it's a good question that you ask. Snow contact is, do you feel the ski from the tip to the tail? Does the ski feel planted on the snow? A lot of people will kind of relate that to, oh, you need a stiff ski to do that. But that's actually not really the case. Is with the right layup, you want a ski that really kind of just, you feel the whole length of the ski, that brings you confidence, right? So it's not nervous. As soon as a ski starts to lift up and have reverse camber, where you see it in World Cup, for example, when they kind of get the hits on their edge and you see the ski reverse camber, that is part of having a lack of snow contact. So it's really about just feeling the snow, really the full length of the ski. That makes sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. It also reminds me of a statement this father of someone I grew up with, who's a ski coach. He was talking about a kid that was skiing through a course. He's like, if you want to buy a half used pair of skis, he's never skied anything in front of the binding. So so
I think I might know who that is.
it's probably a joke that's made the rounds before, but
Yeah,
who
yeah,
knows?
yeah, yeah.
So that's a good definition to understand, snow contact. I think oftentimes the industry as a whole, we talk about different terms, whether it's in coaching or and other things, and it becomes commonplace, and some people are just embarrassed to ask, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, yeah,
So
fair enough.
I'm happy to do that. Um, let's talk about you mentioned Dynastar using a new technique. How do you distinguish the brands? I'm just curious, like Rossignol as apart from Dynastar in terms of a ski, are they different position? Obviously, if you took a automobile manufacturer like GM, obviously they have Chevrolet, they have Cadillac, they have Buick, different brands for different market segments. How do you distinguish Rossignol and Dynastar in the ski marketplace?
That's always a good question. We have to exist in the same market, right? I think if you look at Rossignol, I mean, Rossignol really covers everything from top to bottom in terms of being a generalist brand, but also a performance brand, but also being an accessible brand. Dynastar really coming from our Chamonix roots. Is, I would say, you could say a little more premium brand in some sense, but really focused on maybe a little more free ride in that sense, although we're still really active in race, as you know, with Noel Clement in slalom, for example. But it's obviously a challenge to differentiate the two brands. I think the skiability and the technologies we use are different to basically give each brand its individuality and its, let's say, skiing characteristics. Um, but we exist in the same space, ultimately somewhat going after the same consumer at times. but Rosnol is the bigger, larger generalist brand, and Dynastar is, I'd say, a little more of the specialty brand.
Got it. And with respect to the boots, Lang versus Rossignol, what is the distinction there?
I mean, I think it's similar in that sense. I mean, when you look at Rosnol, what we really went after, what we talked about earlier, this number one pain point in the market of entering and exiting boots. So we developed a new technology called step-in technology, and that's on the Rosnol side. So again, showing the accessibility of the Rosnol brand. When you come on the Lang side, you look at RS. I not embarrassed to say the number one junior race boot out there. And then you look at what we did with Shadow, again, really focused on the active, experienced skier and providing more power to them. So quite a technical brand on the Lang side and a little more accessible on the Rossi side.
Interesting. Um, so talk about sustainability and manufacturing. I'm at the industry as a whole is thinking about sustainability, whether it's energy usage for ski areas. How does Rossignol Group think about sustainability in terms of materials and manufacturing processes these days?
Oh well, this is a huge point for us. I don't know if you've been following, but we have a dedicated program called the Respect Program that focuses on this at many levels, at the manufacturing level, at the factory level, in terms of reducing emissions. But then also in our product, we have a real focus on that. We launched 2 years ago, 3 years ago. We launched essentially it's actually the product was called Essential, and we actually open sourced that to all manufacturers. It was a pretty much 100% recycled ski. It was built on a slalom structure and skis extremely well. That really for us was kind of the gateway to start to bring those technologies, show them in a proven way, and then start to bring that into our line. So that Dynastar hybrid core I spoke to you about is from a traditional core is I think 56, if I remember right, 56 or 58% more environmentally friendly to build with less waste than, let's say, the traditional core was. So it's a big focus for us. And, we believe that's important for us to preserve our playground here.
And are there trade-offs between using sustainable manufacturing, either materials or processes, versus performance, or I mean, you're trying to make a balance, I presume.
This is what we wanted to prove with that Essential ski that we launched 3 years ago. Is that you don't have to give up any performance for the eco-friendly constructions. And in Dynastar, actually, I mean, when we were first testing this hybrid core, we actually improved the snow contact from what we had with traditional cores. So our goal moving in is always never to give up on performance, but to find the way to do it. And that takes some trial and error, but it's we shouldn't have to compromise performance for that sustainability, in our opinion, and that's what we strive for. And that takes some innovation and takes some time and some research and development, but it's a constant focus for us moving forward. I mean, our goal is to be to improve that by 2026 on the Dynastar range. I think 60% of our skis will have hybrid core with a 60%, close to 60% reduction in emissions. And on the Rossignol side, the same goal, 60% aligned by then.
Great. And that's a perfect segue into, thinking about the future and, what the trends are. So you talked about how, using my experience and slash arcade example of the market trends, where are we headed, over the next 5 to 10 years in both, skis and boots, with respect to the trends and advancements?
Well, the trends are always hard to to grab. I mean, I think we've been coming off, let's say, a 10 or 15-year run where free ride has been the trend, right? And I think there's some renewed energy on piste skiing. It seems to be the trend at the moment, I think. In terms of kind of constructions and whatnot, I think at this point, um, right now there's research being done on materials, but we've looked at a lot of different materials. I think the trend will be to continue to work on what we just talked about earlier, is finding ways to do sustainable stuff and enhance performance even more than we already have. I would say one of the main focuses is I believe, and I mentioned it earlier. I think the industry as a whole has gotten better at finding balance in the skis. And this is, to me, a trend that I'm seeing where the skis are really powerful, but still manageable, right? They don't punish you for suboptimal body position and so on and so forth. And I think this is something of, back to the sum of the parts of finding that balance where the ski really kind of comes around you and comes back is a trend that I'm really seeing moving forward more and more.
It sounds like that if I were to point to a sports analogy, oversized tennis rackets. When we move from wooden tennis rackets to the Prince, large aluminum frame, and now obviously everything is graphite or carbon frame, and there's different flex patterns and different string tensions that you can use. You're trying to make it more accessible and easier to play tennis in that scenario. Similar in the skiing realm, which is make it more forgiving, the ski, the boot, etc., to improve and perform well, despite sort of in the tennis world, mishitting the ball or a lack of proper positioning in skiing.
Yeah. I
So
mean, that's kind of what I'm speaking to with this balance, and I think that's the trend that I'm seeing the most now. Is that when you really hit a home run is when you have a ski that like the expert pro and your athletes can ski, and your dad can ski, right? I mean, that's when you're hitting a home run, something like a Soul 7, or I would put like an Experience 88 in that era of time. And it's when you nail all that recipe together and get that balance that's right. In terms of materials, the carbon I still find is I don't believe we have found the right way to use it yet. Part of snow contact, going back to snow contact, is snow contact is as a ski goes through, you have all these little micro vibration waves coming through. Carbon tends to kind of amplify that rather than dampen it in skis. And so carbon can make skis lightweight and they can be pretty powerful, but they tend to be a little more nervous in that sense. And, we talked about boots and having that information coming back from your proprioceptors to tell you that information, and carbon deadens that a little bit. So I don't think, we continue to work on it to find the right way to use it. But for me, I think it's more about, finding all those parts and pieces working together. When you get that is when you really get a special ski.
yeah, if you were to talk about carbon, it's light, can be stiff. You can get power out of it, but all those things that you talked about, which is that twitchiness or nervousness about the material, can be offset by something else, whether a big aluminum sheet layer, or to use old ROSI technology, the VAS, the vibration absorption system.
VAS, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know if the Venustar had that. what I called the chicken heart, which was at the tip, the heavy weight.
We all called it the chicken heart.
Yes. I have a pair of those 223 downhill skis in my basement. So those are
That's awesome.
not they're not taken out anymore, but they're just to appreciate. They you sort of okay, you've just added a whole bunch of weight to the ski, which sort of offsets the weight savings that you're supposed to be getting from the carbon. So, well, why bother, right? It's there's probably other ways of skinning that cat, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, weight was a trend for a little while as well, right? I mean, we saw that over the last 10 years in boots as well as in skis that everybody would talk about weight and talk about weight. And, I'll give you an analogy with, let's say, what we would call, some people might call that cross, the cross touring category where you have like a free ride boot, which has a hike mode in it. And everybody would talk about weight. And, they would always be like, well, that boot skis really well, but it's 1,800 grams. And this one is 1,600 grams, and it's made with this really lightweight plastic. Lightweight plastic traditionally has no energy. So you lose feeling and you have deadness. And when you look at 200 grams, it's like you got to put some things in perspective. And 200 grams is like 3 or 4 AA batteries in your hands. And to be honest, at your feet, you don't actually feel that difference. But if I were to tell you, take these 4 batteries, put them in your pocket and you'll ski better, you're going to say, give me the 4 batteries. I'll happily take them in my pocket to ski better. So I always, and I think the trend now is coming back. You saw a lot of brands going with the lightweight plastics and boots, and now they've all started to come back to that more energetic polyurethane, polyether. So again, that pendulum in the market, swings one way and it starts to level out in the middle.
Well, I will point back to your old bike days and bike racing days that people are weight weenies and they're looking for the
Yep.
titanium ball bearings to save 2 grams, or whatever the case may be. I mean, I think there's that same mentality. I know I'm guilty of it. I have a much lighter. They happen to be Rossignol boots for alpine touring, and I intentionally sort of gave up on performance. Right, I knew, but I'm going to use them to tour and skin, and I also bought a different pair of skis as a result that are lighter. They're not things that I will go out on, and if I were just to ski the front side of the hill every day, for the full day, that's not their intended purpose. And that's partially because I suck wind when I go up the hill, and so I was trying to suck less wind as much as possible.
Did it work?
Who knows? I still come back shelled.
I think, again, there was a trend where everybody was trying to build a ski or a boot that could do everything everywhere. And it's about having the right tool for the right job, right? When you go mountain biking, you don't take your road bike.
Exactly, or vice versa, unless you're
Right.
racing cyclocross, and then
Yeah.
you try and do a little bit of both. So, what is for the recreational skier? Who's not going to go out and buy 4 pairs of skis? How do they approach the buying process to pick the ski that's appropriate for them, both obviously in skill range as well as the type of skiing terrain that they're going to encounter most frequently.
Well, I think first and foremost, you have to be probably honest with what type of skiing you're actually going to do, right? If you're going to be mostly in resort, mostly groomed trails, I think any of the all mountain skis is going to match that really well. Then you can start to narrow that down. Are you more of a cruiser, or are you more of you want to make short turns, or if you like to be in the moguls, you want to look at some different things, right? But I think usage is probably the most important kind of question to ask first in that sense, right? Is where do I want to perform, or where am I going to use this product the most realistically? And then I think there's, we've said that. So, but then there's also all the brands have this, but there's a spirit involved, right? It's what tribe do you belong to? You know, are you more of a race tribe person? Then maybe you want more of a front side oriented something coming from race, but you also have more of the free ride tribe, so to speak, right? And it's you know it's not like skiers versus snowboarders, but you belong to a tribe, and that's why you'll see most brands have an all mountain offer that's, let's say, more slashy, smeary, more free ride oriented with a graphic to match that. And then you have also more of the really directional on piste carving type of ski.
So I guess intended use, and then within those lines, usually, I think Rossignol makes several different models to accommodate not only where you're skiing but your ability level.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, the ability level is obviously a key point in terms of where you're going to fall in the range. I mean, the best is you want to find a ski that you can progress on, and not one that's too much for you, but also one that's not too little for you, right? You want to be able to grow into it.
So, what is, in that vein, what's the biggest mistake skiers make when choosing equipment?
I mean, my guess would probably be overestimating ability. I guess that's a hard one to say, or overestimating where you actually plan to use it. You know,
Yeah. Well, I guess I was going to interrupt you, but I don't have to now. The uh, how do you? So, as a manufacturer, you're designing equipment to perform a particular task, basically. How do you educate the retail sales associates, the people who are selling the gear and having that direct consumer relationship, and assist them in helping the customer choose the right gear? Because I think that's probably a critical component of this whole line of questioning, which is, you know, how does the end user, the consumer, know what to buy?
yeah. I mean that going all the way back to the development process that starts in our brief, right? Of clearly determining who the consumer target is for a model, right? You start by the family, let's say arcade, right, or on piste all mountain ski. And then as you go through each one, we kind of identify who is the consumer, and that somewhat connects to a price point. Then, as we start to deliver that information to our country organizations, so all the guys here in the building here in the U.S., um, we educate the sales reps, which do the product clinics, and the product clinics I think are invaluable for the shop kid to understand where we see a ski positioned. We also do a fair share of that online as well. We have a ski selector online, but I think you can find a lot of that type of ski selector. Um, the shop kid traditionally also understands, I think, pretty well the, let's say, segmentation. I mean, ultimately the market has four segmentations, right? You have race, all mountain, I would call it all mountain recreational for, let's say, just the casual skier, and then you have free ride. Let's take out tour and all that, but I mean, ultimately all the brands pretty much segment within those four categories. And I believe that the shop staff knows those four categories pretty well. And I would say the kid on the floor has skied on a lot of different product. They've done a lot of test days. So I think they're a valuable asset to tap into for a consumer to help you start to narrow in where you should go.
Yeah. As we wrap up, what's exciting you about the future of skiing and ski equipment? In the not too distant future.
I mean, I'm always excited about trying to make things better. I mean, to be honest, getting into product development in one way, it ruined skiing and it made skiing amazing. It ruined it because I can't ski without thinking about what can I make it better. Even the best ski that we have in our line, I'm like, how can I make it better? And so that excites me. I love to build stuff. I love to take experiences and improve them even. So me personally, that's what I'm excited about. Um, I think obviously sustainability. I'm excited about what we can do of marrying and improving performance and sustainability together. I think that that's a key point that still needs a lot of work from us to do.
Sounds good. And what's one behind the scenes detail about ski design or boot design that would, might surprise skiers?
Well, boot development, it's a terrible job.
Because you're dealing with people's feet all the time.
Well, you're dealing with your feet into boots that don't always fit when you're developing, right? Well, the end product is always dialed in, but when you start, it's not. No, I would say, I mean, you don't in any development, whether it's boots or skis, uh, about 70% of it doesn't pass, right? And that's what part of the development, right? So there are some times where you get on a ski and you're like, oh my God, this was a miss in development, right? We got some work to do here, and you just want to get down to the bottom safely.
That reminds me of a time I went skiing. It was after college, after my race days, and I only had my race boots. And I put them on, and I started crying on the lift ride up. It was they were that joke about binding feet, but like my feet were squashed in there, and I cried. I left the group. It happened to be a bachelor party. I said, "I will see you later." I skied down painfully, found the nearest ski shop, and bought a new pair of boots. It was just that bad. So I understand what you're describing there. It can be
Yeah, you got to
super
fail to
painful.
succeed, right? You got to try
Yeah,
things, and we try new materials and they don't work, or we try a new construction and it doesn't work, or in boots you think you got to go here and it just hurts like hell. But that's all part of development. That's how it works. I'm sure the bike industry or the car industry is the same. I'm sure some cars drive terrible at first, but when they finally go to market, they're dialed
yeah,
in.
got it. Um, so that's boot design. Skiing, same thing. It's just that you have to kind of, as they say, eat your own dog food.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. It takes failure to get success. So, and without trying, you don't know. So, but sometimes the try, you're like, oh boy, that one, that one can go. There's times where we're like, well, that one can go straight into the garbage.
That was a swing and a miss.
Yeah,
Well, Thor, thank you very much for joining me today. I've learned a lot. Hopefully, the audience has as well. And more than happy to try new stuff. As you can tell, I've been skiing on Rossi for quite some time, and enjoy the product line.
awesome. Well, enjoyed it.
All
Hopefully, we have
right.
a great winter. You guys have snow, so let's
In the
get
east,
going.
we have snow. Hopefully, it comes your way out in the west shortly.
It always comes out here. Since I moved here, I haven't had a bad winter yet.
Okay. From your lips to God's ears. If you enjoyed this episode, follow or subscribe to Fresh Corduroy wherever you listen. And if you know someone who loves skiing or just likes to understand how things work, share it with them. You can find Fresh Corduroy on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Thanks for listening. See you next time.